Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. So today's video we are going to be taking a look at Sentinels. Scout Sentinels and Armoured Sentinels. We're just looking at the ones that are available in the Imperial Guard Codex. We're not looking at forged ones here. Just to let people know. And yes, so Sentinels. I have been using Sentinels a lot recently. I must have played, I can't even think now, 10 games with Sentinels in a variety of configurations. And I just realised that they're absolutely a fantastic unit. And I had dismissed them. I had dismissed them at the beginning of 8th edition, I'm not going to lie. I'd taken a look at them and gone, no, they don't look very good. They don't seem worth it. But after using them, after being forced to use them and forcing myself to use them, game after game, it became very apparent very quickly that Sentinels are quite good. They're a hidden gem of the Imperial Guard Codex in 8th edition. So we'll quickly go over what the difference between a Scout Sentinel is and an Armoured Sentinel is. And then I'll go over sort of how I've been using each type. And we'll sort of discuss why I've been using them as well. First thing I want to say is the reason I'm doing this video is because I initially dismissed Sentinels out of hand, but also there's a lot of crap on the internet at the moment. I guess there's a lot of people which have played 6th and 7th edition for such a long time that they got so used to just, myths around certain units, and they got so used to just being able to sort of look at a unit and then, in theory, math hammer that unit and then just decide without ever playing it whether it was good or bad. And 8th edition is a very different game. It's a very different game, and I am finding more and more that there are units that look not very good on paper, and actually when you get them out on the field they are respectable. They are very good, and they shouldn't be underestimated. A good example outside of this is I never see anyone else using Tech Freaks Engine Series on the internet, on YouTube, in Imperial Guard lists. No one takes a Tech Freaks Engine Series. I never leave home with that one. So I'm going to be doing a video on the Tech Freaks Engine Series at some point, because I think he is also a hidden gem. And like I said, I never leave home without one now. Ever. Every first thing that goes on my list practically is a Tech Freaks Engine Series. And that sounds crazy, but that's just so I make sure I don't forget him, because he is that useful. So, going back to Scout Sentinels and Armor Sentinels, hidden gem, right? So the only tactics I ever saw online were the only configuration I saw online was Scout Sentinels with Heavy Flamers. If it wasn't a Scout Sentinel with a Heavy Flamer, then it was a waste of time. And everyone said that Armor Sentinels are a waste of time because if you math hammer it, you can get so many las cannons in a heavy weapon team versus the number of las cannons you can get on an Armoured Sentinel. And the ones in the heavy weapon team are better, so there's no point ever taking Armoured Sentinels. And Scout Sentinels are the only thing you should take. And they're amazing because you can put Heavy Flamer on them, and then you can use the Scout Vehicle maneuver so that they can move 9 inches at the beginning of the game and deny deep striking. That's all I ever saw. It was Scout Sentinels with Heavy Flamers or don't bother. After playing many, many games, I want to say now, I actually am not a fan of Scout Sentinels with Heavy Flamers. I think in theory, they were very powerful, and I was led to believe, in theory, that they would be the kind of Sentinel that I wanted. But after several games, it became very apparent to me that I did not want Scout Sentinels with Heavy Flamers. Crazy as that sounds. So, before we get into the nitty-gritty of what Sentinels I've been using, let's actually take a second to reflect on the difference between a Scout Sentinel and an Armoured Sentinel. So, Scout Sentinels are movement 9, weapon skill, ballistic skill 4+, strength 5, toughness 5, wounds 6, attacks 1, leadership 7, 4+ save. Armor Sentinels have movement 8, weapon skill, ballistic skill 4+, strength 5, but toughness 6 Wound 6, attacks 1, leadership 7, and a 3+ armor save. Scout Sentinels are 35 points, Armored Sentinels are 40 points. So, the key difference is essentially what it comes down to is the Scout Sentinel is 5 points cheaper, but, or a better way to look at it is the Armored Sentinel is 5 points more expensive, but for that 5 points, you're getting +1 toughness and +1 leadership. So, it's definitely worth that 5-point upgrade. What's another interesting thing to note, which a lot of people overlook, is the Armored Sentinel still has an 8-inch move. I think that might be the fastest move for walkers. Well, I think Sentinels, what I mean is, obviously you've got Scout Sentinels, you've got a 9-inch move. What I'm saying is, I think Sentinels have the fastest move of any walker. I haven't seen any other walkers with moves that fast. I'm thinking of Dreadnoughts, that's a 6-inch move, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it is, if someone could check that for me. I've only been moving my Ironclad Dreadnought 6 inches. So they are surprisingly fast. Surprisingly fast. They get around the board, Armored Sentinels and Scout Sentinels. So the Armored Sentinel doesn't have any special abilities, but don't forget that it does come with smoke launchers, and when it explodes, it only does 1 mortal wound to everything around it. Very important to remember, it only does 1. A lot of your opponents will blow up your Armored Sentinel and then say, right, do your D3 mortal wounds if it explodes, and they try and use it to do lots of mortal wounds to the vehicles around you, around the Sentinel, and you've got to remind them, no, it's only 1 mortal wound. So, important to remember, when it explodes, it only does 1 mortal wound. Scout Sentinel does have a special ability, which is what a lot of people believe is the best thing about the Scout Sentinel, is it has the Scout Vehicle rule. At the start of the first battle round, but before the first turn begins, you can move this unit up to 9 inches. It cannot end this move within 9 inches of any enemy models. So you can basically redeploy it 9 inches forward. So, that's the difference between Scout and Armored Sentinels. Now let's take a look at the most common choice, according to the interweb, which is the Scout Sentinel with a Heavy Flamer. So, the argument behind taking this unit is that you deploy these Sentinels out front, and then before anyone moves anything, you move them forward 9 inches. And that creates an additional 9-inch buffer zone for enemy units that are deep striking, and then it basically protects you from enemy deep strikers. That's what happens in theory. And then if anything does deep strike down, or anything does try to get too close to your Sentinels, they have to take D6 Heavy Flamer Overwatch shots. So that's the theory. I've actually run that a few times now, and let me tell you what actually happens. You move your Scout Sentinels forward, and then your opponent takes a look and goes, okay, I just won't bring in my reserves turn 1. Because most people don't have huge amounts of reserves that they bring in. They have some reserves. They have a portion of reserves. So they don't have, very few people have half their army in reserve. Very few. So it's no biggie to your opponent if he doesn't bring them in turn 1. His Alpha Strike can wait. It's fine. If it is an Alpha Strike that he has on his reserves, then he's okay, generally speaking, to hold on a turn. Because what he'll do is he'll hold on a turn and then kill 1 or 2 of your Sentinels, and then that whole 9-inch bubble thing's gone. Let me tell you, the notion of the Scout Sentinel being this amazing anti-deep strike unit disappeared for me very, very quickly. It's very easy to kill a Scout Sentinel. They're only toughness 5, which means even small arms like las guns and auto guns wound them on 5s rather than 6s, and they've only got a 4+ save. Only takes 12 wounds to down an armored, to down a scout sentinel. When you think about it, that's kind of easy to do as well, because I mean, think of a squad of someone shooting a squad of conscripts at you, or guardsmen, or cultists, something which isn't normally anti-tank. If they get into rapid fire range, they just open up on you, they'll probably kill one of your scout sentinels. And I can actually say from experience, scout sentinels die to small arms too easily, too easily. It takes very little for your opponent to kill a scout sentinel. Normally, if you've moved them forward with the heavy flamer, they're going to be in rapid fire range of your enemy, and it's his spare firepower. We've talked about this concept before, where your opponent has his main firepower, and then his bits that he's got left over. Oh, these lasguns aren't in range. Oh, this heavy bolter's not quite in range. My scout sentinels were going down to the spare firepower, the leftover firepower. They weren't doing much. So I tried a different approach to my scout sentinels, which was to make them as cheap as possible. The reason for this was to fulfill the brigade detachment, and I started doing this as part of building up my Steel Legion force. So I tried the heavy flamer scout sentinel, and I found it died too easily, and my opponents had easy ways of getting around any potential trickery that I did trying to stop their deep strikers. It wasn't a problem. So I tried just making them as cheap as possible, and just going for the multi-laser. Just go for the multi-laser. 45 points, 3 of them, 135 points. That's enough to fulfill all my fast attack choices for the brigade, cheap as chips. Well, the problem I found with this, as I'm sure many of you will already be expecting, is they just didn't do very much. Multi-lasers are kind of cack. They're definitely not worth it. If I was to do this again, post-chapter approved, I would definitely consider, and I was convinced I had to use Scout Sentinels, I would definitely consider Autocannons now. Autocannons are only 12 points. It's paying extra. So if you're going to take the minimum Scout Sentinel tax to fulfill a brigade, then you might as well pay an extra 6 points and go for those Autocannons, trust me. Because the multi-laser ones didn't really do very much. The one configuration I found Scout Sentinels and multi-lasers in as a good configuration was when I was using them with the Cadian Doctrine. I often found putting my 3 Scout Sentinels together, put them on a flank, cover an objective, 9 multi-laser shots a turn, just because they've stayed still, re-rolling 1s, that was often enough to lay down a decent amount of firepower. The 36-inch range was long enough, more than long enough in most cases. And I actually successfully did 3 wounds to a Space Marine captain one turn. And it wasn't impossible. I was regularly putting, 5 or 6 wounds on a Space Marine squad in that configuration, regularly killing 2 or 3 Space Marines a turn, which isn't too bad for a tax unit. But again, the problem I felt was I'm basically going into a 2,000 point game with only really 1850 points, because approximately 150 of my points were on these Scout Sentinels that weren't doing anything. So they didn't work for me. And that was trying them with the Cadian Doctrine, where they were okay, but still not great, and trying the Steel Legion Doctrine, where I just didn't find it useful. I found them they died too quickly. So I'm not a big fan of the Scout Sentinel, if I must say. I just think it makes a lot of sense to upgrade to the Armoured Sentinel. Now, I have tried the Armoured Sentinel in 2 configurations. One with las cannon, one configuration with the las cannons, and one configuration with the plasma cannons. Now, I think this is the way to go with Sentinels. Okay, I think las cannon armor Sentinels are really, really powerful. The 3 games I've used, if not more, at least 3 games that I've used las cannon armor Sentinels, they've performed very, very well. It's just, they kind of encompass the philosophy of go big or go home. It's the whole thing of, you've only got, Sentinel's only hitting a 4+, so you can take a little pissy bloody multi-laser and try and hit a few more times. But even if you do hit, you're probably not going to wound, and you're probably not going to actually get past their armor. So it's better to take a las cannon where you're only going to hit 50% of the time, but when you do hit, you are going to kill something. And that's what I found to be super successful with my las cannons, armor sentinels. They're my go-to choice now. The plasma cannon armor sentinel is okay. It's more of a budget option. The only problem with the las cannon armor sentinel is D3 shots is okay. I was tending to find that I very rarely got the 3 shots. I was tending to find I got 1 or 2 shots. I was tending to find I got about 5 shots a turn from my sentinels when using the plasma cannon one, which might be a little bit below average, but that was what I was tending to find. Look, the problem is you can't afford to supercharge it. You can't afford to supercharge the plasma cannon, because if you roll a 1, you just lose your sentinel. Just dies. And that's a big thing to take. It's a big loss to take. So you're kind of forced to use the standard profile, and the standard plasma profile isn't that good. It's only strength 7, safety -3, so fair enough, but it's only 1 damage. So if you think about it this way, you pay 5 points for the las cannon, you go up by 2 strength, and you go up to D6 damage. It's much, much, much better. Plasma sentinels are okay, but in my Steel Legion list, what I found is, and I'm running a brigade, what I found to be much, much more effective is to put the las cannons on my sentinels and put the plasma cannons on my Leman Russes. So currently what I'm running in my, and that way, the reason you can do that is because then Leman Russes can shoot plasma, and if they get a 1, they just take 1 wound. And because I've got my Tech Priest, which I mentioned earlier in the list, he just repairs those wounds. Between a Tech Priest and Jury Rigging, you can generally repair any damage you take from plasma overheats a turn. And the Leman Russ Tank Commander will let your Leman Russes reroll 1s to hit with orders, plus use inspired tactics, so you can do it on 2 tanks a turn. So what my current sort of configuration is I've got my 3 armored sentinels with las cannons, and then I've got my tank commander with battle cannon, 2 plasma cannons, and a heavy bolter, and then I've got another battle tank with that configuration, and then I've got 2 executioners with plasma turret, plasma cannon sponsors, and heavy bolter. And as you can see, I've got plenty of plasma in that list with all those Leman Russes toting plasma. Every Leman Russ is toting at least 2 plasma cannons. Every single one of them. They're all overcharging all the time because they only take 1 wound tops, and I can repair any damage, and I can do reroll 1s. So that's enough, and because they're all overcharging, they're all strength 8 and they're all doing 2 damage. That is lots and lots of anti-tank. And I was then using plasma cannons on my armor sentinels, and I was like, the armor sentinel ones, when you're using the 2 profiles side by side, the non-supercharged, the standard and the supercharged on the plasma cannon, you notice how shit the standard plasma cannon shot is, and you very quickly learn you have to overcharge or go home. It used to be a bit of a joke, real men overcharge every time. Now it's actually true, because overcharging, if you've got ways of mitigating overcharging, like Leman Russes do, overcharge every turn. It's amazing. So that's why I stopped using plasma cannons on my armoured sentinels. After a couple of games, I was like, no, I've got plenty of plasma. Go back to the las cannons. I haven't bothered with autocannons because, I think they'd be good on Cadian ones, but I have tried autocannons to death this edition. You've seen me use them on my battle reports. I've tried autocannons on infantry. I've tried autocannons on tanks. I am not a big fan of autocannons. The only time I've ever got autocannons to work is with Cadians, because it just allows you to actually get some hits. But yeah, not a big fan of autocannons. Don't see the point of a heavy flame on an armoured sentinel. And don't ever take the missile launcher. It is a waste of time. Missile launcher looks cool, but it is... You're never, ever, ever going to shoot the frag option. Look at the frag option. It's D6 bolter shots. You're never going to use the frag option. You're only ever going to use the crack option. And if you're only going to use the crack option, why are you paying the same price as a las cannon for a missile that is strength 8, so -1 strength and -1 AP? I'm shaking my head. No, 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 no. So, that's what we've done with Scout Sentinels and Armored Sentinels. So, just to recap quickly before we finish the video off. Scout Sentinels, I am not a fan of them. I think they can serve two purposes. One, they can be the cheapest way to fill out a brigade. But the reason I don't like doing that is they often don't do anything. They often just are a waste of 135 points if you take that configuration. However, I could see Scout Sentinels with the Cadian Doctrine, with Autocannons being a very cheap Cadian way of fulfilling a brigade that also remains effective. So that's the only way I can see Scout Sentinels being good. The Heavy Flamer anti-deep strike option I found just died. Didn't achieve much. My opponents were very easily able to get around it. There you go. Armour Sentinels I'm a big fan of. The 3+ save and the toughness 6 is a huge deal. They still got an 8-inch movement. They're very fast. I prefer, in my list configuration, I tend to find, I'm sure a lot of other guard players will agree with me, I tend to find I have plenty of plasma anyway on my in the rest of my list, so the best weapon option to go for is the las cannon, because if you hit, you're going to hurt. Now, the last thing, one last thing I want to talk about before I talk about the last thing, so the second to last thing, one might say, is I still use my Armoured Sentinels as anti-deep strike units. I just deploy my Armoured Sentinels at the front, and then I tend to deploy my units 4 inches behind the Armoured Sentinels, or just over 4 inches behind the Armoured Sentinels. So that means if my opponent does deep strike in, my important units are further back, and if he does get the charge on the Sentinel turn 1, you stay over 4 inches away behind it. If he kills the Sentinel and tries to consolidate towards your other vehicles or other units behind, you're over 4 inches away. He's only got a 3-inch consolidate, so he can't get into combat with you. You've got to be over 4 inches, remember, because he only has to get within an inch. So make sure you're a nice, comfortable 5 inches away. I've done that in 2 games. Both games, it worked fine. Absolutely fine. Bearing in mind I was using my Steel Legion, so I was able to castle my vehicles up a bit more. But just saying, the Armour Sentinel can do the Scout Sentinel job just fine. Because it's still relatively cheap. An Armour Sentinel, the las cannon, is only 60 points. That's still relatively cheap. So, final thing I want to talk about is, when it comes to Armour Sentinels, is what doctrine should you be using for them? Okay, that's the important one. Okay, Cadian Doctrine is fine. The rerolling 1s to hit do help to somewhat mitigate the fact that you're only hitting a 4+. Okay, so Cadian 1 is okay. Catachan 1 is pointless. For Armour Sentinels, Catachan 1 might be okay for this Flamer Scout Sentinel, but as I've said, I don't think that's a good option. So I wouldn't bother with the Catachan 1. Wouldn't bother with the Valhalla 1 is pointless for your Scout Sentinels or any Sentinels, because Sentinels don't degrade. That's a really key, awesome point about them. They've only got 6 wounds, so they don't degrade. So a Scout Sentinel could be on 1 wound, and it is just as much a threat as if it's on 6 wounds. For Stroyan heirloom weapons, sorry. No. Simply because you've got a 48-inch range on most of the Scout Sentinel weapon options anyway. So, there's no point. 48-inch range on las cannon is more than enough for most things. Armageddon, industrial efficiency, big fat yes. That whole AP -1 being treated as AP -0 is key to your key to your Armoured Sentinel survival. On Scout Sentinels, it doesn't make a big difference because it's only a 4+ save. Normally, they will die anyway. But on Armoured Sentinels, it genuinely makes them tough to kill. It makes it, for most opponents, it makes a Scout Sentinel as hard to kill as a Chimera, because you've got a similar toughness and the same save. So, very, very powerful. I had an Armor Sentinel take 2 wounds. That was it from an entire Storm Raven unload. That was it. Because all his Hurricane Bolters and Assault Cannons and Heavy Bolters just bounced off. Just bounced off. And then he missed with the 2 Storm Strikes, which was unlucky for him. Or I think he fired the Storm Strikes at something else. But the point is, my Armor Sentinel took Twin Assault Cannon, Twin Heavy Bolter and Hurricane Bolter. And because it was Armageddon Industrial Efficiency, it took 2 wounds. That was it. And because it was toughness 6. Because the difference between toughness 6 and toughness 5 on the Armor Sentinel in that situation was, yeah, the Hurricane Bolter was still wounding me on 5s, but it meant the Heavy Bolter was wounding me on 5s, and it meant the Assault Cannon was only wounding me on 4s. Big, big difference. Talon, Swift as the Wind. I think this is very powerful. I think Talon, Swift as the Wind is possibly the #1 choice for your Armored Sentinels. Okay, it's very close between that and Armageddon Industrial Efficiency. Okay, simply because the Armageddon one makes, it depends what you want to go for. The Armageddon one makes you more survivable. The Talon one means that your Sentinels can move around and not worry about -1 to hit with heavy weapons. Very powerful, very, a lot of potential use there. If you're going to be moving those Armor Sentinels a lot, you want to be Talon. Stormtrooper Doctrine, I don't think you can take it on Military Defense. I don't think you can take it on Scout Sentinel, so it's not a problem. Mordian Parade Drill. Surprisingly, my favourite army, it's not that great. The +1 to hit made for Overwatch, it's not really useful, unfortunately. Sadly, not on the Armor Sentinel. So, yeah, that's it really. One last thing to mention, I haven't used the Sentinel Doctrine, whatever the hell it is, Go Recon. I haven't found a use for it yet. It could be useful though, but it's only affects Scout Sentinels, which is why I've not been using it. I knew there was a reason. So, to recap, Scout, if you go online, you'll see a lot of people telling you that Scout Sentinels are the absolute bee's knees. They're the only Sentinel you should be considering, and you should only ever be putting a Heavy Flamer on them. I would like to say that is not true. Scout Sentinels and Armor Sentinels are much, much more tactically flexible. A las cannon, or if you don't have a lot of plasma cannon Armor Sentinel in your list is good. It's cheap, it's survivable, and it will definitely annoy your opponent. Scout Sentinels, the Heavy Flame option is okay, but I tend to find that they'll die so easily. And the Multi-Laser one is okay, but you might as well spring for the Autocannon these days. Overall, what I want to say is Sentinels are good. They're good support units. They are either good support units by being sacrificial, or if your opponent doesn't have any deep strikers, keep them back. Keep them back. Fire those las cannons every turn, and you'll get a good return on your investment. What you've got to remember is 3 scouts. Is what I want to sign off on to give you a tangible feeling of why Scout Sentinels are viable. 3 Scout Sentinels with not Scout Sentinels. 3 Armored Sentinels with las cannon is only 180 points. Okay. All they need to do, all 3 of them combined, all they need to do is kill 1 decent medium tank of the enemies. A Predator with autocannons and heavy bolters. That's all they need to do. That's all they need to kill. A Lehman Russ. That's all they need to kill. A couple of transports. And when you're firing 3 las cannon shots a turn, and most games go past turn 5 now. All my games I've been playing are going past turn 5. You're getting between 15 and 21 las cannon shots. If your opponent doesn't kill them, it's more than doable for you to kill an enemy vehicle. More than doable. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's gone on a bit longer than I wanted it to, but we have covered 2 units in one go. We have covered absolutely every aspect of them. The one thing I haven't mentioned is the Sentinel Chainsaw. Look, the Sentinel Chainsaw is a bit of a gimmick at the end of the day. It's only 2 points. I'll admit that. But but all it does is give you AP -1. Generally speaking, it's not enough, but it's only 2 points, so whatever. But I hope you guys have found this video useful. I know it's gone on a bit. Please leave lots and lots of comments down below. How have you been using your Sentinels? Give me ideas, share your tactics, share your combos, and as always, we can use these videos to create a proper knowledge library for other guard commanders. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.